Thank you guys for coming and attending this talk here. I know there's been a lot of great talks here today, but I want to show you guys some fun stuff. So have you guys heard of NativeScript before? Okay, good majority. Excellent. Has anyone here actually coded with NativeScript? Hello world? Okay, fair enough. I'm going to try to start a timer here to help myself. So for those of you that don't know it so well, JavaScript or NativeScript is an open source framework for building native mobile apps in JavaScript, TypeScript, or Angular. And really, you can use just plain old JavaScript, and it works fine. I'm going to use TypeScript in all my demos. I feel lucky to use TypeScript and VS Code on a daily basis, so definitely prefer TypeScript. But to show you guys a little bit of what NativeScript is capable of, I want to show you guys a demo of an app that I've recently launched that is completely written in NativeScript, and in particular NativeScript Angular. And I may touch on a little bit of that here later. But this app has been kind of a passion project of mine. It is Shout Out Play. It's an app that lets you dedicate to your favorite songs and playlists. It wires directly to Spotify. And I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of a live demo. And this will show you a little bit of what NativeScript has to offer.
We've been driving around from one end to
This goes out to all you JavaScript fanatics, and especially Mr. Dave Smith.
but no one's ever seen us. Driving our Econoline van, and no one's ever heard of our band. We're the Mesopotamians, Sargon, Hammurabi, Ashurbanipal, and Gilgamesh. And they wouldn't understand a word we say.
And this is how to record a shout out. Really simple.
Algeria, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Dominica, Egypt, France, the Gambia, Hungary, Iran, Japan, Kazakhstan.
Okay, so from that you can see the app has been a lot of fun to develop. It's a lot of fun to use. It has theme support, and what's interesting about this app is actually it could not have been developed on the web. I love the web, but it's one of these where the Spotify library only allows 30-second previews on the web. So in order to actually create this app, I had to use native SDKs. So this uses the NativeScript Spotify library, which I developed. It taps into the Spotify SDK, iOS, and Android. And I do have an Android version available on Google Play. It is, I would consider, a very early alpha. I am a longtime iOS developer, so I have some great community help that are helping to do some of the Android specifics. But believe it or not, the development of this took less than 3 months, and I only tried Android on August 17th. So it actually ran straight in Android without me doing a thing. And I was shocked, actually. And this was all because of NativeScript, because all the views I had created using NativeScript XML, which is the view layer that I'm going to show you in just a second on how you construct these views. And the Android specifics mainly have to deal with some of the plugins. NativeScript Spotify uses their Android SDK, and it is not feature complete with their iOS one. So there's like a little bit of back and forth. You don't get all the features you get with the iOS SDK. So it's been a bit of a challenge to get some of the features one-to-one complete. Okay. So let me back up just a bit, and let me just describe real quick, again, for some of the NativeScript newbies here, exactly what it is, and it helps to describe what it's not. It's not PhoneGap and it's not Ionic. Both PhoneGap and Ionic are excellent. They're awesome for web development. NativeScript does not have a DOM, so there's no web view. You're actually coding in straight native views. They use an abstraction that is an XML, very concise DSL language that lets you construct these views in one universal format, and then that will get you a native Android view and iOS view. So no DOM, no HTML, no window, no global window object. It's not Xamarin. They don't do any cross-compiling. It's 100% access to the native APIs. There's no bindings you have to write. You can literally code right against the native API. So you get day one support for every new feature. All the new iOS 10 features, we got the second iOS 10 landed. There's no .NET. It's also not React Native. So in React Native, you do have to write some Objective-C, Swift, or Java code. In NativeScript, you're coding directly to that API. So you're not having to write any native code. You're writing all that code in JavaScript. It is free and open source. You can actually go and look at the source code today. NativeScript's, actually their org on GitHub has tons of excellent code samples. And you can check all that out. It uses lots of pre-built code. You can use everything from NPM. So because it's a JavaScript framework, you get access to, of course, NPM library, all the modules that are available there, and then also CocoaPods and the full Android arsenal. And if you've never heard of a CocoaPod or anything from Android Arsenal, they're actually just like the NPM registry. So you get basically a rich set of libraries that are open source and available for just Objective-C, and those are CocoaPods. And then you get the same through Android Arsenal. And you can use anything that is available there in NativeScript. You can install these plugins and actually just start coding against those native APIs. It is really, really amazing, actually, once you get in there and start tooling around to realize this whole world opens up to you, because all these native APIs that you thought you didn't ever have access to being a pure JavaScript developer, that whole world opens up to you. So it's pretty wild. So I'm just going to give just a little look at one of the first things that caught me when I first got into NativeScript, and that is how you construct the view. This is the first core thing that you really want to understand. Native layout containers are much like divs in the DOM. And this is really how you lay out everything in NativeScript. All these basically mirror what the native layout containers are on each respective platform. The most common, though, are stack, grid, and absolute, which I have first here. Dock and wrap I personally have not used in an app myself, but I can think of a few cases where it would be handy to have. So to look at what that looks like, on the top we have a NativeScript view, and it's wrapped with a page, which is just defines the page, and then inside is a stack layout, and we have a label and a button. And if we look below, this is a very similar DOM comparison. So this is how I would do exactly that layout on the top on the web. Div, same class P20. We've got an H1 down here. We actually have an H1 class on the label above, text center, same classes. We recently I've been contributing with a couple people on a theme, much like a Bootstrap theme for NativeScript, where you get all these standard classes that you would get with Bootstrap. So H1s, actually, we're trying to do a mirror of every single variable that they provide in Bootstrap. So you could actually use a web project that uses Bootstrap and immediately code a NativeScript view with the same classing and use it straight away. This is an Android example of how you would code directly against a native Android API. This is a very simple example, but this is using the core Android text format time object. So this is just constructing a time, and it's actually setting it, which is calling set on the native time class, and then we're just logging that out. And of course, we get what we would expect, just exactly that formatted time object. This is an iOS example, and this does not have a particular Objective-C broken method. Their methods in Objective-C, if you have done any Objective-C development, are very interesting. Some of them can be very long. And NativeScript, what it does is often collapses that method to one single line. And this one is kind of what that would look like, add button with title, for a lot of their longer method calls, but this one happens to be the exact method call on the native platform. So this is straight from the docs. That is a native alert dialog on iOS, and this is straight from the Apple docs. So you can see UI alert view is a native class. And so, again, we are calling in constructing a new UI alert view. We're setting message to a string, and that is a native property on that class. And we're calling add button with title, which again, straight from their doc. So every single one of the API calls, all these properties, you can access in NativeScript and code right against them. So how does it work? This is the part that I'm going to let you look at a diagram, and we'll have a moment of silence. I'll give you 5 seconds to look at that. Okay. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this. I'll let the core engineers, basically, they can describe this very, very well. But that is kind of a high-level view of what's happening there. There's a type conversion service, a metadata generator, which provides those classes as global objects in JavaScript, and then the call dispatcher, which actually marshals those calls straight to the native platform. So the big thing, of course, is you don't want to write iOS or Android code. So those examples I just showed you obviously are writing straight towards the Android and iOS APIs. That's not exactly what you want to do all the time, because some of them can be a little difficult to try to extrapolate. So what the NativeScript team did is they actually created an abstraction and created their entire framework around all these core libraries that you would generally want to access on Android and iOS. And these are very rich. They cover pretty much the gamut of anything I've ever wanted to access as far as developing a standard application. Now, you always want to develop some kind of custom plugin, develop some neat CocoaPod, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. But let me show you an example of one of these modules that they abstracted. File system module, very common. You want to have access to a file. You can create a native file on that platform, save files, delete them, and everything. The top is their file system module we're requiring in. We're calling new file system.file, passing in a path, and we construct that new file object. And that is actually giving us a native file object on Android and on iOS. And below is how that extrapolates out. So that Android line is equivalent to calling new file from the file system module in NativeScript. And below on Apple, it's even harder to do because their API can be a little weird in places, but this is actually getting a reference to the default manager, the file manager, and then creating a file at the path content attributes. That whole 2 lines to create a file on iOS. So again, in NativeScript, it's just as simple as calling new file, but that is actually what it's doing under the hood. The HTTP module is just another example I want to show you. This is very common. Requiring it's just HTTP is the name of the module, and their abstraction is just as simple as saying get JSON. We're calling a JSON REST service, and that will hand us back an already JSON encoded object. So this is calling the native HTTP libraries on the respective platforms. If you can see this all right, this is actually from their framework online. So this is the abstraction of HTTP. Get string, get JSON. This is the API that I was just showing you here, and you can see that it calls HTTP request, which is an object. If we look at the top of this file, this is really important to see, and this is really interesting when you go and look through this code, what they have going on here. HTTP request is requiring in HTTP request, which on the respective platform is actually going to grab the right platform file. So this is going to grab a file with a .ios suffix, and then on Android, it's going to grab the .android suffix. And those are going to grab these native implementations, and these are written in TypeScript. NativeScript, the entire framework was written in TypeScript, and this is a sample of what the Android underlying implementation of HTTP looks like. You would never need to look at this generally because, again, the API is abstracted into their HTTP module. But again, it's interesting to look at because you can see these native Android calls being made. That com TNS async HTTP, that is a native Android class. And then
for Android, was it compiled down to like a Java AP
There's no cross-compiling. It's runtime and it's marshaled in runtime. So this native library here is the iOS implementation of HTTP. So under the hood, you can see a lot of Objective-C classes here. NSURL session configuration, NSURL session. Again, a lot of interesting things going on here. Now you could, of course, code against these yourself. These are just helper abstraction modules that they wrote in their framework that help you code against it in a very standard API across both Android and iOS, which are supported now. Windows is also supported, Windows Universal, which is fairly new from this spring. And there's been some talk of potentially supporting desktop APIs. So it may go there. It definitely could go there based on what they have already developed so far. So that is iOS under the hood. And then, of course, it wouldn't be super nice if you couldn't style these things with CSS. So there is rich CSS support. It grows every day. Right now, there actually is, I couldn't throw a percentage out there, but a good number of CSS properties are supported, I will say. And they're continuing to add new support in each point release. But this is an example of course, just a standard CSS-styled native view with labels and a font icon. And then let me just hop into a project. And I thought about doing some live code. But instead, I want to take a constructed project. I'll show you the project format. And then let's deconstruct it a little bit. And we'll do a couple things on the fly here just to see what we can do. This is just a sample project that shows data binding live. So this is a tap example. This is something that comes with some of the default templates that you can bootstrap a project with. It also has this ability to open a modal. Modals are one of those things that whether you're on the web or on native, they can always be funky to do. On the web, they're always funky to deal with, especially without a framework. But native modals are handy to know how to do. So let's look at that for just a second, and I'll talk about the data binding on that project. So this is a standard project format here. If you create a project in NativeScript, you'll often get a setup just like this. An app directory is where all your code is housed. The app file has a import of the application module, and we just start it with the module name. So that's just bootstrapping our main page, and that's what kicks off the native app. I should say that NativeScript comes with a command line utility. So you have rich command line tools to create these apps and run them. And to create one like this, that very app we were just looking at, to create it, I could just do no table here. TNS create, and then the name of the app, we could say UtahJS, and we could pass a template. So there's several templates that are available, and you can create your own, but you can actually give a full URL to a GitHub repo that has the package, the main page, and it will create a template based on that. So it's pretty flexible. And then to run, there's several different commands that we can run this with, but I'll use TNS emulate iOS, and that's actually going to TypeScript compile our code, and then it's going to run Xcode command line utility, which is going to run that project in the iOS simulator. And this should be the project that I have going so far. I don't think I've made any changes to it. So let me jump into a new page. So one of the common things that you may want to do is just navigate to a new page. If you're constructing an app, you want to create a couple pages and just navigate between those two. So we're just going to add the ability to do that from this main page here. So let's add a button that will let us navigate to the page. So main page XML, this is the markup for that page that we are looking at. And we're just going to add another button here. I use the NativeScript XML snippets that are available through VS Code, which I highly recommend. it makes this much, much easier. I'm going to just do an NS button. I'm going to give this open page. And we'll bind it to a new method that we're going to add called open page. And now if we hop over, actually I'm going to add a class real quick. So if you'll notice, these classes look a lot like Bootstrap. I am actually already using the NativeScript theme core that we've published that has these Bootstrap-like classes available, and you can use that as a today. So button primary. And then let's hop in our code behind file, and we will add that method here. Is that too? That's pretty big, isn't it? There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to add a method here, open page, and we'll import one of the modules that they provide that makes this really easy, and it is from the UI frame class. Now, their docs, once you get and read through their docs, there's a rich guide, a great starter kit you can go through to get familiar with some of this stuff. But the UI frame module in particular gives you this handy topmost utility that you can grab the topmost page in the native app. So again, whether it's Android or whether it's iOS, this is going to give us whatever the current page is. And then we're going to simply call navigate. You can see we have nice IntelliSense here. It tells us what that is going to do, and we're going to pass in new page, and that is all we're going to need to do to navigate to that page. Now, new page is something I did create already. We'll look at that. That is just a TypeScript file with its view file here, the XML, which has nothing in it right now. We have a stack layout that's empty. So if we actually navigated this view, it would be a white screen. So let's just add a button to this, because we're going to add some functionality to this button in a minute. We're going to call it Open Actions, and we'll leave the tab empty for now. Let's save this. And instead of emulating, what I'm going to do is run a different runtime command, and that's live sync, so we can actually do this stuff live and watch our changes. So live sync iOS emulator watch. And we have our open page now, and you can see that just opens our page. So again, the same, very simple. You can also see the equivalent of that app running in Android, styled up the same way with a modal with the same effect happening inside. This is actually using the Facebook Shimmer effect, which is a native plugin straight from Android Arsenal and from the Cocoa Pod. Let's see, I was checking the time here. I have 2 minutes to go. Okay. Let's take a quick look at this Facebook Shimmer effect real quick. This is straight from Facebook's published Shimmer effect. This is an iOS API. The shimmering view, I'm going to show you, this is written in that plugin just as it is written here and collapsed into the NativeScript equivalent, which looks like this. So we have the FB shimmering view. We're calling allocate on it, and we're calling init with frame, which takes a CG-rect make. So on their example on the GitHub shows self.view.bounds, which actually equates to a CG-rect make. So that's why in JavaScript here, we're just calling directly CG-rect make. And the gist of what's going on here is this class is exposed as a custom component to NativeScript, and then this native view is actually the accessor we override in this custom component, and that's what hands back that native implementation. So we're setting iOS to equal that native component that we want to develop. So in this case, it's the Facebook shimmering view. And down here, when it's onloaded, which fires right when the component XML is loaded in view, we set the content view to the content native component. And that iOS, if we were on Android, it would be this.content.android. And so content view is coming straight from the FB shimmering API. So here is, again, Facebook's native shimmering view, and there's content view that they're setting to a native UI label, and we're doing the same thing in the NativeScript plugin here. So that's just kind of a brief look at kind of custom plugins as a talk in and of itself, but I just want to give you guys a taste of what writing some of that native code in JavaScript is like. And I think that might be time.